Coming to you from Long Beach, California, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government, brought to you by Engaging Local Government Leaders. I'm Meredith Reynolds, Deputy City Manager at the City of Long Beach, and your GovLove co-host for today. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. You can support GovLove by joining ELGL and taking advantage of professional development opportunities like Camp GovLife, the 2025 ELGL Annual Conference in Santa Rosa, California, from October 1st through 3rd. Whether you're a seasoned local government pro or a first-time local government camper, Camp GovLife is a perfect place to learn, grow, and make memories with fellow public servants. So visit elgl.org today and learn more to secure your spot. Also this year, we are celebrating 10 years of the GovLove podcast. Help us commemorate this important milestone by calling the GovLove hotline at 720-282-1752. Leave us a message with your favorite GovLove memories or your predictions for the next 10 years of local government. You might just be featured on a future episode of GovLove. And now, on with our show. Today's guest is Peggy Flynn, City Manager of Petaluma, California. Peggy was named the City of Petaluma's 10th City Manager in February 2019, and she brings nearly 30 years of public sector experience, having served in communications and leadership positions for the City of Novato, the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, and the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and the San Jose Redevelopment Agency. As the City Manager of Petaluma, Peggy oversees the administration and operations of a vibrant and diverse full-service city with over 60,000 residents. She is passionate about fostering a culture of innovation, transparency, and engagement, and delivering effective and efficient public services. So welcome to GovLove, Peggy. Thanks for joining me.
Meredith, so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. We're very excited to feature a number of our Northern California leaders in advance of the GovLife conference. So very cool to get to talk to you today. We're going to have some fun first. So we're going to do our lightning round to get to know you a little bit better. So let's start with, what is one fun fact about you?
Well, for over 20 years, I was a fitness instructor. I taught everything, Pilates, cycling, weightlifting, aquatics, everything but yoga. And that was my side gig while I was working in local government.
Did you have a favorite class that you taught?
Pilates, it was so holistic. I kind of feel like that's like my job now, right? It's just so holistic. So I loved Pilates. Loved it.
Very good. And then what's the last movie or TV show that you watched?
Join or Die. It's like a documentary by Robert Putnam. It talked about decline of community involvement and its impact on democracy. It's just a brilliant documentary.
All right, listeners. So you heard it here from Peggy. That's a good one to check out. All right. What is a book, article, or podcast you'd recommend other local government professionals check out?
Aside from GovLove, I would say Abundance by Ezra Klein.
Ooh, yes.
He talks about just coming, not coming from a place of lack and coming from creativity to, kind of create that intergenerational, feel of abundance and lifting everybody up. So I would highly recommend that, even if you want to hear it on an ebook. So
yeah, I'm a big e-reader. So yeah, definitely. All right, last lightning round question. What is one go-to restaurant or meal in Petaluma you'd recommend others try?
I laugh so hard because here we are, the culinary rich city. So I'm going to say 4 of them. I would say Lunchette, Stockholm, Della Fattoria, and Table Culture Provisions. And that kind of runs the gamut of, price point and different types of cuisine, but just amazing.
Is there like a go-to meal that at these places, like, okay, we're going to Stockholm, like what would you have?
Oh my gosh. They have such good specials. it's so very Mediterranean, Swedish.
Okay.
Is that, so kebabs and their hummus and they're just amazing. So, and then you got to have Swedish candy at the end. They have they've got the Swedish candy, which is awesome. My guilty go-to.
Yeah. Well, we are recording this live during our lunch break, and so now you're making me very hungry.
I was thinking about Lunchette after this, which I'm going to go to. So yes.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for doing that lightning round, having us get to know you a little bit better. Let's kind of jump into your story, Peggy. So what is your public service origin story? How did you find your way into local government?
Well, really, it came through when I was going to San Jose State. I was a journalism major, and so my trajectory is very atypical and very non-traditional.
Mhm.
I was inspired by my local government professor, Terry Christensen, who taught local government class. It was called Local Politics, and we did uh, we played a game called Circleville, and it was talked all about city. And I was the city manager, which is crazy because I didn't know what a city manager did. And
Come full circle, huh?
I know, right? And so he was just trying to teach us, like all the different interests and how to balance. And he starts off and he says, we've got $100,000 deficit, which I laugh now because if we only had $100,000 deficit in local government, we could figure that out.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
And I said, oh, I just won't take my salary. And he comes running across the classroom. He goes, you can't do that. And I said, yeah, I can. I'm the city manager. And I remember that. And I mentioned that to him when I reached out and when I got this job, because he just taught me just this love of serving the public and local governments where it's at. So I experienced the agility and effectiveness of local government. He placed me in my first internship at the San Jose Redevelopment Agency. And, the largest redevelopment agency in the state, even above LA in terms of tax increment. And then I became their first communications director. It was just an incredible experience. And working for them and on legacy projects like the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, that was a $250 million initiative to work with neighborhoods to prioritize what was important to them, and the city be responsive and be able to fund that and build capacity in these neighborhoods that didn't have even informal leadership. Yeah, and then we were the second largest producer of affordable housing in the state, right
Oh, wow.
below HUD. So we were doing like 40% affordable housing in San Jose. And just, working for local and regional governments in various capacities throughout my career. So, that launched me into just the love of service and being creative, that I never lost the journalism lens of how do we demystify government and work with the community to create a city that works for them.
Yeah, that's such an important perspective. I can definitely appreciate that. And let's talk a little bit about this circuitous path. So you've definitely taken the scenic route, right, to city management here. So I've read a little bit about your background. So tell our listeners what sorts of work you've been responsible for in the multitude of roles that you've had over the years. And are there any particularly notable experiences that led to some key learning moments for you?
Well, having that communications training and background and writing, news articles, was always about, the reader and how do you break down information for the reader so they can break down complex concepts and get them engaged, right? That is the bane of every journalist's existence. And once I got behind, the curtain in local government, I said, oh my gosh, we have so much to say and we're not doing it well. And San Jose was a great training ground to do that. So the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative that I mentioned, when the mayor had mentioned it in his State of the City address, a colleague of mine, Kip Harkness, and I were tasked with defining what Strong Neighborhoods was. And we spent a whole weekend together delving into what does that mean, because we had we had 10 districts and a council and a mayor, and each district was going to pick 2 to 3 neighborhoods to be part of this Strong Neighborhoods Initiative. And these were neighborhoods that had pockets of county unincorporated areas in them, but not have, no coalescing, had no no real HOAs, very, very diverse neighborhoods, and just approaching a third of San Jose to ask them how the city could serve them and the things that they needed required what we said were knock and listens, not knock and, hey, government's here to help, but hey, we want to hear from you. What are your experiences? What are the things, how can we be of service? And we did that over my time at the redevelopment agency, and it became a staple of how San Jose does their work, and has changed the face of how San Jose did a lot of capital projects and worked with the public sector, worked with banks and other private entities to make things happen in these neighborhoods that had a lot of disinvestment. So that was the exciting time for me. That really was pivotal, because you had to kind of go out there very vulnerable to neighborhoods that didn't have a lot of interface with government.
Yeah. And then you sort of took that and you moved on to a couple different organizations. So what has been kind of that thread for you as you've stepped up in leadership?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge in government, one of the biggest challenges is land use, right? It's always a flashpoint for communities. Those are those community character conversations that are so challenging. And, whether it's how cities are funded or how how you achieve housing for all, how you serve how you create a thriving environment for your business community, all rests on land use. So our general plans, so redevelopment gave me a really good land use background. And then I went to the water district and I got to learn about water conveyance and flood control. And we had a lot of acreage as the water district, and that abutted many different communities. So working with the community regarding use of land and visioning of how we use land was I think is such a big challenge for government, that I continued that trajectory. Then I went to the Ag and Open Space District, and we did conservation of both parkland and ag land here in Sonoma County. And that was just this, it came to, full circle of how to work with the community on the properties that they own.
Yeah.
How do you achieve everything that we need to achieve as government, and have the best plan for how to use the property?
Yeah, and California, many other states do as well, but California has a very robust history of water and water rights, and how who gets water, who doesn't get water. And Sonoma County has a history of valuing both agricultural and open space. So those are some pretty cool places, to be in those moments to do some of that work. That's pretty neat.
It was really fortuitous, for sure.
Yeah. And then, so how did you end up in Petaluma? So you're here, you're the leader. At some point in 2019, your council made a choice and passed you the baton and said, "Okay, Peggy, it's time to lead." What led you to that?
Well, I'd been driving through my city working in Novato. I was the assistant city manager in Novato, and I was driving through the city I live in every day going, what's going on? We've got 2 failed sales tax attempts, but the community is so supportive. What's going on? And it was really, it was political. It was a political infighting and not being on the same page. And so when this position opened up, I was really clear with the council in my interview. And I say this to all the listeners, because you've got to manage expectations. You've got to bring your authentic self to these positions, so you can do the things that you can do, right? So you're able to, you're not encumbered. And so I just said to council, I said, our community believes in us, but it always dies at council level. So we need to row in the same direction. Otherwise I can't do this job. And that was the day one of a 2-day interview. And I went home and I told my husband, I did not get that position. And I did get the position, and I'm on my 4th council now. And whether it was passing a 1-cent sales tax after 2 failed sales tax attempts, and we passed it in November of 2020, and 2020 was a very pivotal year because we had the pandemic, right? And we still passed over 60%. So we passed a 1 cent sales tax. We have since leveraged that 1 cent sales tax into over $200 million worth of grants, which has been amazing.
Excellent.
Really changed the trajectory of one of the oldest cities in California. And on decisions like managing, taking it back over our fairgrounds after 80 years, and
Wow.
doing the largest lottery selected panel of residents for a deliberative democracy, envisioned and paid our residents for 90 hours of deliberation to
Hmm.
come up with a vision of our fairgrounds. Council was unanimous in their support for doing that. And then finally getting our second smart station, which was private, the land was privately owned. And so council said, here, those are the three things we want you to work on. And we got it done in 3.5 years.
That's excellent.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for those who may be coming to our Camp Gov Life conference, if you have a chance to take the SMART train, highly recommend. I'm a transit nerd, so I will take all the public transit I can, but it's such a beautiful ride, and you get to see all of the communities along the track in Northern California. So there's a pretty historic stop there in downtown Petaluma, which is adjacent to your downtown, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, we've got now we have one on our east side, which is awesome. You can walk to Lagunitas from there. So just
Oh,
saying.
very good. Just saying. Well, let's talk a little bit about Petaluma. So you mentioned it's one of California's oldest cities, and I'm a nerd of a lot of things, history being one of them. But there's a lot to learn about Petaluma. So it's located in this fertile valley. It's got this beautiful river running through it, and it was part of um, you know, kind of this bustling destination of gold rush and providing food and products and things to the Bay Area. And I saw a really cool marketing campaign from the early 1900s calling it the world's egg basket. So I thought that
What?
was so neat. But with
Yeah.
these beginnings of, kind of agriculture and trade, tell our listeners a little bit about kind of that history and how Petaluma has evolved, and what does that community look like today?
Yes, it's really exciting because unlike where I was in San Jose, where we lost our agrarian roots, right, to
Mhm.
development, to a variety of things. And one thing you'll read in the book by Ezra Klein in his book Abundance talks about we were one of the first cities to create an urban growth boundary, to create just protect our green belts and our open
Mhm.
space, because we were the egg basket. We were the highest egg producer at the turn of the 20th century. And we are also the dairy belt. South County is the dairy belt. And, we have organic dairies, and our animals are out on pasture more than in other areas in the state and in the nation.
That's where
Um,
that's where our happy cows from California come from, right?
They are certainly happy for sure. Those are the green. You can't miss the green hills when you cross over the Marin Sonoma line, and you just see these beautiful rolling green hills with cows. It's a beautiful thing. But Foundation's ag, and with that comes a love for the land and our river. And it's actually a tidal slough, but I'm not going to go into that. But we call it the Petaluma River, and support of the local food shed and protection of our history and historic gems like our historic
Yeah.
downtown. And we're also, at the same time, we're also experiencing a burgeoning of population of families, and with that comes a younger demographic and a growing
Mhm.
Latin population who are asking for more from government, more diverse housing, land use policies and city programs that provide for stronger support of our businesses, improved offerings with our city facilities. Our city facilities, when I came to the city, we were looking at filing bankruptcy in 2021. That would have meant the sale of our fairgrounds, and we we had about $200 million worth of deferred maintenance in our city, because
Wow.
we're an old city. We're
Yeah.
just an old city. So, um, our city facilities, they need to support the needs of a diversified community. So, just better community access and diversity of uses on our in our city parks and properties. So, and we're up for the challenge. And we want to do that with the community. But this having those agrarian roots keeps us. We all defeated Measure J when that came onto the ballot because people are so proud and they're super supportive. Petalumans are super supportive of our local business. And our local business, they are either ag supporting business. They have, our restaurants utilize and take very seriously utilizing the food from the food shed. Our Petaluma Gap wineries. Yeah, there's a Petaluma pride surrounding those agrarian roots that will forever define who we are.
Yeah, that's excellent. Let's talk a little bit about some of the projects or initiatives that you and your team have worked on in Petaluma that you're particularly proud of. You talked a little bit about the fairgrounds. If you want to revisit that, you're welcome to, but there's a lot going on with you and your staff these days.
Yeah, so the other thing is once we got Measure U, our staffing levels were 16% below 2008 levels at the time.
Wow.
And we are a true full service city, even above Santa Rosa, because we run our own ambulance service. So, we have our transit, we have our airport, we have a marina, we have our water treatment plant, and we run our own ambulance service. So our staffing levels were at about 240 staff.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a lot of these things that council wanted us to do, we had a backlog, a significant decades of backlog. There was a hunger, like, okay, we passed a 1 cent sales tax. What's happening? And it's like, okay, we got to leverage. We kind of got to fake it till we make it. And I am just incredibly proud of the team that we've built. We've gone from 240 to about 410 employees and since 2019. And those employees have just helped define how we do business. So whether it was the lottery selected panel and staying true to the vision that the Fairgrounds Advisory Panel came up with on the fairgrounds and the rest of the community, frankly, because it didn't differ from what we heard from the entire community about what they wanted to see at the fairgrounds. So we launched Luma Ice, the largest outdoor ice rink in the North Bay this last holiday season. It was phenomenal. We had 26 days of incredible ice rink experience and really kept people not only in Petaluma, but people came up, all over the North Bay, even San Francisco and farther away to come up and enjoy Luma Ice on our fairgrounds. And then we ran.
Photos. It was so awesome.
Did you come?
No, I didn't come, but I saw the photos. They were amazing.
It was such a beautiful, we employed, city residents and just had we had glide and donate nights. We had like 14 of those. We had a guns and hoses, ice hockey challenge. It was an incredibly wonderful community building effort. Plus, it was us piloting uses on our fairgrounds. Yeah. And then we took over the fair, first time in 80 years. It was city run, and we worked with our ag partners to help us with the exhibits and do the ag part of the show. And the city ran the rest. And you saw people from myself, like my assistant city manager was wristbanding people to finance and public works and just everybody. It was all hands on deck, and it was 4 days of just amazing. It was incredibly successful. So
no duty too small, right?
Yeah, right. But those are that's fairgrounds. We are just, we are in the throes of our general plan update, which is significant for us because our zoning code has not kept up with 2 cycles of our general plan. So this one is actually going to be the piece de resistance that we're actually going to have a zoning code that aligns with our general plan, which we're super excited about. Our housing element was recognized by YIMBY is one of the most creative and robust housing elements in the state. So our focus is housing for all in Petaluma. So yeah, we're kind of hitting it on all cylinders.
That sounds awesome. I love the concept of this through line of, your history of understanding land use and, the things that the community is looking for and kind of where you're at with some of these plans. I think that's going to be, kind of an incredible outcome for the community. And, as small and perhaps insignificant as it may seem, having a zoning code aligned with your general plan makes it so much easier for your staff to interpret things when
Right.
someone walks in for an entitlement or a permit. So
You hit the nail on the head. I feel so horrible when I've got a planner fresh out of school, sitting on our planning counter having to interpret zoning code that's 25 years old.
yeah.
What was the intent behind that one? So
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and some great things for a, a bright future for the city and community, as you move forward, that reflects and respects its long history. So that's a pretty neat spot to be in as a leader.
Really, really an honor to be at this place and time in our city.
Yeah. So here's a fun fact about Peggy, is that she lives on a working cattle ranch, among all of the other amazing things that she does. Peggy, tell me a little bit more about that. And what are the similarities that you can share between kind of that cattle ranching piece and city management? There's got to be some overlap, right?
It's very funny. So I married my husband. He's sixth generation Petaluman. People wear that you'll always hear people say, well, how long did you live? How long have you lived here? And it's how many generations you've lived here that, kind of speaks to that agrarian history. Right, right. But I always remind people, whether you've lived here for 3 days or 30 years, your voice matters. So anyways, husband, 6 generations. Our ranch is literally 5 miles out of town in unincorporated Petaluma, and we have about 50 head of cattle. And we do replacement heifers. We work with 4-H and FFA, and it's just my husband and I. There are no farm hands. There's nobody. I learned ranching in my 40s, and I have left a council meeting at 11 p.m. at night and had to pull a calf at 12:30 because somebody needs some help.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
husband will tell me to put my muck boots on, and we got to go pull a calf. So that's what we do.
Well, in that context, what are some of those similarities that you have seen between, some of that work and the kind of physical
Yeah.
presence that needs and some of the city management stuff that you do?
Well, it's very humble working. You've got to work with what you have, right?
Hmm.
And be creative. We have certain confines, whether it's budgets or, and then you've got to balance interests, right? So you want to make sure that you can fund the things that you need to invest in, whether it's animal management, land management, facility management, and likewise for the city. But at the same time, balance the interests. Make sure that you're nurturing the land, that it can continue to yield. And we grow organic silage for a dairy down the road, and that means there's no pesticides used on our property. And then you get invasive weeds, and it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? Well, in local government, we have that too, right? A new
Yeah.
housing law comes down, and you're like, holy cow, how are we going to pivot really quickly and make sure that it continues to be streamlined and represent our community's needs? So it's constantly being agile and creative, recognizing some of the confines and being creative, and trying to be, solution oriented, because the love of the land, the love of, our city is so strong that there's not room for error. And if there
Yeah.
is, fail fast.
Right.
Fail fast and learn from it.
Right. And don't make the same mistake twice if you can help it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible. I always find interest in, my newfound local government friends who have this really unique, kind of other side to them, or side hustle, or way of life, because there's always similarities that I think that you find in local government in some of these other spaces.
Well, it really just, I think, and that happens whether, whether you're talking to a community member who views you as the city, and then you let them know that you're not only are you a local, but you are a supporter of ag education and of leadership in our ag community, and it just holds a different space, and
Mhm.
it helps people again demystify. And if we could get that story out about all the amazing public sector staff that are out there, because we all have a story to tell, and we all came to this work with pure intent. So it's a good reminder for us, because we got to tell our stories, and I am not good at doing that. So
Yeah.
it's a good reminder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that the calling for public service calls to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And, there's a pretty, for those who have it, a pretty universal call to service, and in service of others and in service of community. And, in my organization, um, we have someone in our HR department who is a pretty famous electronic dance music DJ. And we have
How
somebody who,
cool is
isn't that cool?
that? So
Uh,
awesome.
it's, when you have 6,000 employees, you have a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds. But
Of course.
we have an illustrator. We have a variety of folks who are like me, who kind of grew up in local government, and everyone in between. And I'm so thankful to work with people, know people like you, and be able to interact in these professional spaces, because that call for service is so universal amongst us. And it's kind of that common language, with you, with your staff, being able to say, hey, we're going to stand up and do the best that we can for those in our community who rely on us. And it's a pretty cool profession. I don't, haven't spent time in many other professions, but it definitely feels unique and special. And I definitely appreciate that about it.
It's just such an honor. It's such an honor and privilege to be able to do what we do. And you're right. It's our experiences. We are, our experiences are rich, and we're more than just what we do in our day-to-day jobs. And we bring all those personal experiences to our work and apply those. I see it every day, and I'm thankful that we have that diversity on staff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you are in this space and in local government, it's also a lot. It's lovely and beautiful and impactful. It's also a lot. And so a lot of recent things I've seen in our local government space, particularly on training, is about work-life balance, work-life flow, whatever you want to call that, because a lot of this work is heavy and it can be stressful. You perhaps, depending on your role, you're always on, right? You do, the council and mayor have that bat phone right to you that buck stuff with you, Peggy. So we got to call Peggy, and Peggy's going to save the day and solve the problem. Let's talk a little bit about that balance. So, you're balancing life on this cattle ranch, you're a city executive, and those things require those important moments for rejuvenation. So I know a little bit about, how you have structured this for yourself. Let's talk a little bit about what helps you reset and recommit.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Meredith, because I was, as a new city manager, and going through you know, fiscal and organizational sustainability planning for our organization, getting us out of the precipice of bankruptcy, which we would have failed miserably, that year, because it was the pandemic.
Mhm.
So just being able to shift and do all those things, get us on the right trajectory. Um, and my husband and we've been married now 15 years, and we've had 2 3-day vacations because we have a ranch
Right.
together. So we don't get to take vacations together. And so during the pandemic, I always my go-to is going backpacking. And during the pandemic, my best friend, so I always go with my best friend and my grandson, and my best friend was working for PayPal, and she had taken her sous vide and a teardrop to the coast of Maine. She was like, sis, come out here. I said, I am a city manager. I need to be in the city I'm managing. And then my grandson was getting pulled up from JV to varsity football.
Mm-hmm.
So they both couldn't do our annual backpacking trip, which was going to be Denali.
Oh,
And
wow.
Denali is so different from all the other places I've ever backpacked. I'm a big Eastern Sierra backpacker, but I've done Nepali and other places, but I had never been. I've never been in Alaska, and so every night I would come home and I just did this ton of research on Denali, and I did a solo backpack in Denali for 10 days and didn't see one human being for 10 days. No trails, just had my sat phone and my Gaia app and my solar panel, and spent fully 6 weeks in Alaska, but 10 of those days was solo backpacking. And I've got to tell you, I didn't even hesitate. As a new city manager, you go, gosh, that's a long time to be taking time off. But council was super supportive. And I also think it demonstrated to staff, like not only do you have to take care of yourself, but you need to be able to do things that you're craving to do, that sing to your soul, that feed your soul, that give you new experiences, because then you come back, not only you come back refreshed, but you come back inspired, and you come back with a ton of new ideas, or just open to being having new ideas instead of feeling put upon or just feeling burnt out. So I do that every year. I go and do, last year I did a backpacking trip with my grandson before he went to college. We went to Japan because his culture is Japanese. And so we hiked the Nakasendo Trail, and it was amazing. So just doing those things that take you away from your day to day, because we do show up so 100% in it, and we are, services that number one priority. I just feel like it's just super important, and also to demonstrate to staff that it's going to be fine. We can hold down the fort while you're gone, and it's going to be good for you, and it's going to be good for your team, because it helps people step into leadership and help make decisions when you're not there.
Yeah. Well, that aspect of that call for service often means that we put other people in front of ourselves, and you often hear about put the oxygen mask on first before helping others, and so being able to incorporate that into your work is very important. So how did this come about, where you were able to talk with your council about this concept of a sabbatical, and it seemed like they were very open and supportive of this, which is really great. Maybe not everybody has that, but what did that conversation feel like for you?
Well, it was interesting because I had amassed all this time, and we have, at the time, it was going to use it or lose it.
Yeah.
And I had a council that was super supportive. I mean, we delivered on some things and got some things that were, like getting us, out of a trajectory of financial ruin was a relief, I think, for the council. I mean, I think it was a timing thing.
Yeah. Kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I think that, I've just been very fortunate. I have I really work hard with my council to see us as human beings, because a lot of times, we have these relationships with our board or elected, and it's, produce, what have you done for me lately? And I really try to manage that, because I demystified our staff. We aren't the city. We are Bill and Jane and Javier and Peggy, and we all are, like you said, human beings that are coming to this work with public service first and foremost, and pure intent to serve the community. And we also need to have a full personal life and a healthy family life. That's why we give 8 weeks of parental leave. It's super important, and we allow people to stretch that out. If they want to stretch it out over the year, they can do that. They don't have to take it all at once. I just think it's such a people-powered work that you need to be able to unplug. So, I think the best way to work with your council is being direct, and sometimes that's scary. But if you can't be yourself, it's very hard to do this work.
Yeah. Well, and they seem to know what they were getting from you from the very beginning, from that first interview. So
Manage expectations. Always manage expectations, right?
Yeah. Yep. What do you have a bucket list of future sabbatical locations you'd like to visit?
Well, I did. I flirted a little bit with Wrangell St. Elias, which is also in Alaska, and that's the second largest national park. And that is so remote that you actually have to be dropped in by airplane. So that is my goal.
Okay.
Love to do that. And so that
does it require you to jump out of a plane?
No, they land, but it does require you to cross glaciers. So I got to cross a glacier in Wrangell St. Elias, and I got a good idea of what it's going to take. So, so that is going to be I think that is going to be my big next adventure. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, adventures are a lot of fun. Is there something in particular about that helps you be a better leader?
You have to, you got to trust in yourself, and you got to trust because there's nobody else, right? Because I do it by myself. I mean, I did Denali by myself. And there was at one point where I was bushwhacking down to the Teklanika because there was and I was looking down, there was grizzly scat and places where they had been digging up roots, and it was all fresh. So, I'm in grizzly country, and I'm saying, hey bear, every like 3 seconds. And I stop and I look up at the sky. I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm like, I got to trust myself. I got to trust the 30 plus years that I've been backpacking and the work that I had done on the ground with the backcountry ranger to be able to understand what flora and fauna I was going to experience. Just being able to trust yourself, right? We are, these are highly public facing positions, and oftentimes you are pigeonholed as being a bureaucrat or not having the best interests of the community or just not understanding the community. And sometimes we start to buy into that narrative, like, oh gosh, maybe I just didn't do the right thing, or maybe I'm, and it helps remind me of who I am and helps me trust in myself. And so I think that's what got me through getting through grizzly country and going, I mean, I'm sure there's always a lot of luck to it as well, but I felt like I was prepared. Yeah. And I did everything that I could do to prepare. And so you got to lean into that and be able to feel strong about those decisions that you make.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely don't want to be in those shoes and in grizzly country. That does not sound like something that would be on my bucket list.
It was so primordial. Once I got down to the Teklanika, it was like Jurassic Park. It was incredibly. I did the whole like tears, and when I got I put my tent up. Got into my tent because it's in the summertime in Alaska, and so there's a little bit of twilight, right? It's never totally dark. And my sat phone goes off, and it's my husband who had watched the council meeting that night that council approved our ARPA plan. I said, emergencies only. Love you. Good night.
They're like, that's exactly what was supposed to happen.
Exactly.
To only
he was holding down the fort. But
that's so nice of him. Yeah. Good job, Hubs.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, Peggy, as you wrap up today, tell us what's next for you. What are some special or interesting things perhaps you're working on that our listeners should look out for?
Well, I'm really proud to be part of Cal ICMA and working on the Manager Support Initiative, and really looking at our profession and trying to break through the stoicism, the things that people think city managers just have innately, and being able to kind of break down those silos of knowing when to ask for help, knowing what's out there, what are the resources
Mhm.
for you, because we want that next generation to want these positions. We want all the talent. We want you to be a city manager, Meredith. We want you not to go, I don't want that job because I got to always be on. And, I, I want to break down those fallacies about this profession, that it has to be a certain way, or you have to, or you have to suffer in silence. And
Yeah.
it is an incredibly rewarding and rich profession. But we have a lot of work to do, and breaking down a lot of those pre-existing assumptions about what city management is, and even with the electeds. So part of
Sure.
the committee and I were working on getting electeds and city managers together and having conversations about, like, what kind of training do you need as an elected to know how to work with your city manager, and what's up with this city manager, manager council form of government. Why can't we have a strong mayor form of government? Isn't that better? All those things that affect our relationships with our council, that ultimately affect how quickly we can do our work and how well we can do our work, and also kind of testing the waters.
Yeah.
Coming from a communications background and saying, what, I want to get into city management. I want to get into land use. I want to, you aren't necessarily what you studied in college, and we're so much, our lived experience is everything that we experience in our profession brings us to the point that we're at, and we should so treasure that. And
Yeah.
so I'm super excited about that work. And Petaluma continues to evolve. We have a ton of master planning. So we've got a master plan that's kicking off on our fairgrounds. We've got 2 specific plans around our smart stations, around those priority development areas.
Mhm.
So a ton of amazing things, and just elevating our team. So we have that next group of leaders for Petaluma and the North Bay, and really excited about being able to support that work.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, Peggy. So our last question here. If you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as the exit music for this episode?
Okay, you are not going to believe this, because yesterday I was like, I know what song I'm going to pick. And I drove into work today and I got a notification, because it's one of my favorite artists is Stevie Wonder. There's nothing that Stevie Wonder sings that I just don't spend time belting out. And it's As by Stevie Wonder, and it was released in October of 1977, and it just speaks to, it talks about just being steady, and to me it's the work and the people that I work with, the community, that they've got my heart. They've got my heart, and I'm just going to be steady. And yeah, I love that song. So that would be the song that I would pick, As by Stevie Wonder.
Great choice. Great choice. All right. Well, that ends our GovLove episode for today. A big thanks to Peggy for joining the podcast, and a shout out to the Petaluma City staff.
Woo.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Meredith.
Subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. New episodes drop every Friday. If you are already subscribed to GovLove, go tell a friend or colleague about this podcast, or share on social media. Help us spread the word that GovLove is a go-to place for local government stories. GovLove is brought to you by ELGL, Engaging Local Government Leaders. The best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. And register today for the ELGL conference happening in Santa Rosa, California from October 1st through 3rd, 2025. You can reach us online at elgl.org/govlove or at the GovLove Podcast on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. Thanks for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
And the seasons know exactly when to change. Just as kindness knows no shame, nothing for your joy and pain. And I'll be loving